Welcome to this week's episode of Liberty Chat, brought to you by the Liberal Democrats.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Liberty Chat. This is our weekly podcast for all things related to Liberty and the Liberal Democrats around the country, and obviously with the election campaign coming up ahead very soon. My name's Kirsty O'Sullivan. As you see, we are joined by our three esteemed panellists, Mr. David Limbrick MP here in Melbourne.
Hi everyone, how's it going?
Mr. Campbell Newman up there in Brisbane.
G'day all.
And John Ruddick in Sydney as well. All of our three lead Senate candidates for Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales. Welcome.
Good evening, Kirsty. Good evening, gentlemen.
We have another big show tonight. Some excellent goings on down in South Australia. They've had some great positions on the ballot. They've got their state election coming up in only a couple of weeks. So it's all happening in South Australia. So we'll get onto that very soon. But firstly, let's do a bit of a catch up. Obviously, last week we didn't see the three of you. We had a ladies' night, which was a lot of fun. So David, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so I haven't watched the ladies' night
Wow.
thing. So I sorry, I should have probably. I'm sure it went really well. But what I was doing on Wednesday when you were doing the ladies' night was we had a motion put forward in Parliament about vaccine mandates and things like this, and we defeated the government, which is wonderful. So what does this actually mean? We're getting lots of questions into my office about what this actually means. So there's two parts to the motion that we got up. The first is it calls on the government to end vaccine mandates for general workers and end the vaccine passport system for getting into pubs and restaurants and stuff like that. The government will probably just ignore that. The other part, though, refers these issues to a new advisory committee, which is a committee of experts that have been appointed, and this was part of their pandemic legislation thing. This will be the first thing that they get as a committee to look at these issues, and the Parliament can't actually direct them to look at these, but I think it would be very unlikely that they would get a motion passed by the Legislative Council asking them to look at something directly in their remit and ignore it. I think that would be unlikely. So I'm quite hopeful that they're going to look at these issues. Now, what sort of outcome will they come up with? I don't know. We're taking a bit of a risk. I've looked at the members on this committee. Some of them I know, some of them I don't know. I think we just take a chance and see what the experts come out with. But I think there's a lot of academics and stuff on this committee. I think they're going to be reluctant to just, spew the government line. I think they're going to, because their reputations are dependent on it, right? So I think that they're going to have to look at this issue very carefully. And the question that I've put to them is, even if people thought that mandates were necessary back in October, one must ask, are they still necessary now? Is it still a proportionate response? Now, the Liberal Democrats never supported mandates at all, but I think even people that did support them must reassess whether they're still proportionate now. And I'm hopeful that they'll do some work on that. So we're really excited about that. The other thing that happened, which I'm sure you talked about last week, was our campaign launch, which was probably the most awesome political event I've ever been to. There was we tried to count people. There's probably about 400 people there. We had it was like a concert. It was like a festival in the park.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was really awesome. Kirsty was there. There was heaps of other people there.
David on the drums.
Yeah, I played drums. I played Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi and Uprising by Muse. I think we should have probably practiced more songs. I only had two up our sleeve. We didn't have much time to practice with the other musicians.
Two more than me, mate.
Sorry?
Two more than me.
Yeah. So we ended up doing an encore. We ended up doing an encore of Living on a Prayer because everyone was having fun and stuff. But look, it was really great to see such widespread support of the party by everyday people. It was fantastic. If you haven't already seen Rebel News did
Yes.
a video on it, which is absolutely fantastic. You know, I know people have differing opinions on Avi Yemeni and stuff, but I think that the video that he did was absolutely awesome. If you haven't seen it, please watch it, share it. It's a really good promotion for the Liberal Democrats. So, you know, definitely recommend it. The other thing I think that was interesting about that event was the amount of sort of, you know, pandemic heroes, I call them, that turned up that have sort of spun into the orbit of the Liberal Democrats. You know, like we had Real Ruction there, we had, you know, Topher there, who's been, you know, he's a long-term supporter of, you know, liberty ideas, but he's only recently joined the party.
Yes.
You know, a whole bunch of other people there. You know, Emily,
Jerry.
Jerry Anuon. I mean, all of these people that have sort of, you know, popped up as sort of heroes in the pandemic have spun into and supported us, which I think is absolutely wonderful. So I'm really hopeful. There's lots of other events happening. I went to another barbecue recently as well, and there's going to be more barbecues. There was meant to be one on Saturday, but it might get postponed due to the weather, unfortunately. So I won't give you the details of that because it might not happen. But yeah, please get involved if you've got a chance. I love going to these barbecues and talking to people. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that Rebel News video because I was actually going to bring it up as well. If you haven't seen it, hopefully someone will share it in the chat box because it's almost like an advertisement for Liberal Democrats. It was fantastic, and we have definitely had new members from all over the country who have actually used that specifically as the reason that they've joined. Because we always ask people, "How did you hear about us?" And I even had a guy from WA who joined because of that. It was about an event in Victoria, so that was we definitely need to thank RV and Rebel News for that because it was.
I've already thanked them. And look, I mean, this is the sort of video that, you know, you could pay lots of money to make yourself, and a third party makes it. Just, you know, we didn't have any control over the editing and stuff, but they just got footage, put it together into a story, and, you know, it's funny as well. Like there's gags and stuff in it. Like it's actually
it's in the chat box now. If you haven't seen it, it's all in there now, people.
Yeah, it's a pretty entertaining video.
Yeah. Now, speaking of heroes, Campbell, you've been a bit of a hero today, cleaning up with some of the flood damage up there in Brisbane. What's going on at the moment? What's the latest update?
Well, perhaps just to give an update on what I've done in the last week, and then I'll come to the floods and the cleanup stuff today. Last week, I went to Cairns, Townsville, Mackay and Rockhampton. And for people outside Queensland, I've probably just got to quickly explain that, you know, Queensland politics really does necessitate going to these large regional cities who have also quite diverse requirements or, you know, problems and issues that they want politicians to sort of take notice of. So, and there's also rivalry between, say, Cairns and Townsville, just as an example. But then Mackay thinks Cairns and Townsville get everything. So we went up to Cairns, that's where we started, and then basically worked back down the coast. Just did a whole lot of activities, seeing chambers of commerce, meetings with mayors, spoke to a fairly big lunch for the Cairns Chamber of Commerce. I can't remember exactly how many people were sort of.
There was at least a couple of hundred people at that one.
Yeah, it was a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
In terms of print media, we got I'm just looking at the list, 2 articles in the Cairns media, different publications. We got Townsville print, big write-up in the Townsville paper. Got write-ups in 3 different publications in Mackay and the Whitsundays. There's one that's pending in Rockhampton, and then did about 10 different radio interviews, some extended, some news, you know, just for news grabs. And what we're going to do, Kirsten, is the great thing is we've got the Freedom Manifesto, so it's our high-level strategic document for the whole country. But what we're going to do is, after the conversations we've had, we're going to go back to each of these cities and say, here's our plan for Rockhampton. So, for example, when I was in Rockhampton, I was with Steve
Murphy,
our great candidate for
Capricorn. I know that. That's where I'm from.
He's probably, you're part of the world, so he's probably online tonight. I hope he is.
He better be.
Steve was there with me and doing the radio interviews. I put him on the spot on one of them. Sorry, Steve, mate. Anyway, nothing like being dropped in the deep end. But we're going to go back. So we'll go back to Rockhampton and we'll say, here's our 6-point plan for Rockhampton. And the great thing is it's things that the mayors and the chambers of commerce and the economic development agencies really want. I mean, it's their stuff. You know, for example, one of them is that the Rockhampton community want permanent army forces based there. So they want army units moved from the southern part of Queensland or southern states to Rockhampton. And indeed, when I was Premier, I was starting to talk about that very thing anyway with the Australian Defence Force. So that's easy to do, and I'm on the record and being consistent. So great media, great engagement, and we'll come up with these plans. But then on Friday night, so we Friday afternoon, we flew back on the aircraft that we had, a light aircraft that a donor had placed at our disposal. And we're flying in, very hairy trip over the mountains the last 20 minutes, bounced around through the socked in overcast, landing. It's been pouring down for several days. And I got to say that I was immediately like, well, have they warned people about flooding? And that's an initial criticism I share with this group this evening. The warnings in this 2022 flood have been quite appalling from both the state and local government level, and there'll be more to be said about that. And, you know, frankly, they couldn't do anything about the floodwaters, but, you know, if people had known, they could have taken action, and there was far less warning than previous ones. Today, I've been out helping clean the house of a business associate, someone who works in our firm. So I was there to lend a hand with the young guys who work in the business, but also Lisa went along. So we spent 6 hours sort of taking stuff that's been flood damaged, taking it out, you know, the old ritual, we've been through it before, 2011, taking it out to the footpath, putting a huge mega pile the council are going to take away. But then what you've got to do is you've got to go in and you've got to, so the water level to there in this house, you pick a spot about 300 mils higher, and then you just strip the plasterboard from there down, because you have to let it all dry out, and you've got to get the silt out because it collects in the bottom of the framing and gives a musty smell to the house if you don't do that in the future. So it's a pretty full-on day, crazy day, but it was good to be absolutely be out there and helping a friend. I guess the other thing I've done Paul Murray Live on Sunday night. I'm doing that as a regular stint, like David's doing that a fair bit. And, we'll be doing 2 more regional trips at least. We're also going to go to the Rockhampton show, and we'll have our Lib Dems Lemonade stand there, and we'll be there all weekend sort of engaging with people. So that's, and our campaign office didn't get flooded, but because of some work that was being done on the building a couple of weeks ago, there were massive leaks in the roof, and we had a new water feature which didn't go with the party image.
No,
the team had to move today, so well done. And finally, I just again want to reflect on what a great candidate Steve is. He really is doing us proud up there, and he was along for all those meetings, and it's going to be great to work with you, Steve, and do the other lower house candidates.
Well, I'm actually looking forward to seeing the office. So I'm going up to Brisbane on Monday for the week. So hopefully it'll be all cleaned up by then, because I've got to help some other family members with some cleaning.
They moved today next door. So it's all a seamless transition.
Lovely.
How's your fitness, Campbell? Like, I saw those pictures of you, and I was thinking, I think Campbell's a few years older than me, but it looked like you were doing some pretty hard work, and I'm not sure I could keep up with that.
It's hard. I got to tell you, it's hard physical labour. Better for the young. The stench is really quite bad, and it goes everywhere. For example, as I came up to the home office this evening, going through the garage, the fact that the car had been down one of those streets, the garage stinks of the smells of the Brisbane flood, which was a bit of an oversight on my part. I should have had the gurney out in the street. But so it's hard physical work, and it's very humid up here.
Yes.
We've drunk literally litres, each of us drank litres of water today. Litres.
Well, you can't drink 4X because they're flooded too.
No. So mate, this is the first beer. I swear, of the day.
Well, it sounds like you've earned it, Campbell. Good on you, mate.
That's it. And as Lisa in the chat says, must have reminded you of 2011. It certainly reminded me of 2011 as well. We were
sadly
was born. We were stuck in the floods ourselves in 2011, and my son was born in Rockhampton because of that. Yeah. Well, and John, it's also pretty heavy rain in Sydney right now. What have you been up to over the last couple of weeks? What's been moving along with the campaign?
Well, I thought people would be interested to hear where we're up to with a little matter called the High Court.
Yes.
And that was 15 days ago. And our legal team said, I said, well, when are we here? When do we get the judgment? Originally, they were thinking we could get a judgment on the day or the next day. Now, then they sort of told us the day after, they said, look, should be sometime the next week, won't be more than 2 weeks. So we're now over that. Okay. Now, now, we're all just guessing. So obviously the justices are away conferring and coming up with a judgment. They might write one judgment that they all agree with. There might be dissenting judges, so we don't know. But look, somebody said to me yesterday, I said, look, is this a good sign or a bad sign? And this person got background in this type of law. Said, look, if they were going to throw it out, if they were sort of going to go against you, they'd be more likely to do it sort of sooner rather than later. So I thought that was encouraging. But anyway, the timetable is this. The lawyers will phone, the High Court will phone the lawyers and say, we are coming out with a judgment at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The lawyers will let me know, and then I will let the party know. And so then at 10 o'clock the next morning, the judgments will be simply put on the High Court website. So who knows when that's going to be? Hopefully soon. Okay, so what else has been happening here? I guess 2 weeks ago we were in Wagga, had a fantastic event with Dean McRae, who's full of energy, doing a great job, not just in his own seat, but elsewhere, which we're very grateful for. And, look, the locals I spoke to, basically 100% of them said they weren't real happy about COVID. And, the local media in these towns, and Wagga's the second biggest, it's the biggest inland city in New South Wales, so it's important. And we had at least two media outlets there. And last week, and I thought it was a great event. We had about 100 people there, and just a very good atmosphere. So I think Dan's off to a good start. He's up against Michael McCormack, who really should retire. Okay, so because he's been the Deputy Prime Minister and it didn't work out. So anyway, now then we went to Dubbo last weekend for our very good new candidate for Parks, which is half of New South Wales. Peter Rothwell, who's a farmer. He's
going to be on the show
very impressive guy. Oh, terrific. I didn't know that. That's great. Thanks, Kirsty. And, at the last federal election, I'm pretty sure Parks was our best seat. We got just over 8% of the primary vote, okay, which puts us in third position. Now, I suspect that was because the big issue out there is the Murray-Darling Basin. And, David Lionhelm was certainly championing that issue. And we had the former candidate come along, who's a very good guy. He's very helpful to Peter. And again, the local media, I gave a radio interview and a press interview, and they need content, these smaller non-metropolitan papers. And, I think as we get closer to the election, they'll be wanting to talk to the Liberal Democrats more and more often. Okay, now then this Sunday, we've got the big glitzy Wentworth launch, Daniel Lukovic. We've got Ross Cameron, we've got Rowan Dean.
We've got Campbell Newman. Campbell's coming down.
I should have said I was coming down.
Very grateful for Campbell.
Yes. And we've just lost John's internet. But anyways, I can keep going with that.
Is he there?
Yes.
Well, it's at Darling Harbour.
Now, so we're all on track. Yes.
Sofitel Darling Harbour. We're losing your internet a little bit. It's going a bit funny there, John. Sorry.
I think we're back in business now. We're good now.
Yeah. The information about that is all on the website. Get your tickets. It's going to be a whole lot of fun and a great chance to meet the New South Wales Executive and also many of the candidates, not all of them, but it will also be just a great afternoon, a Sunday afternoon. It's 1 till 3 p.m.
And I can also report the New South Wales campaign is doing its very best to twist David Limbrick's arm so that he can come up here for an event for a campaign launch. So, and we're grateful, David, that you are considering that. And we look forward to hopefully
I definitely want to come up. I've only been out of the state once since the pandemic started, and that was for our Canberra AGM. So I'm very much looking forward to going back to Sydney. I love New South Wales and I love Sydney. It's not as good as Melbourne, but
I'm just excited for going on a plane again on Saturday.
I want to do a road trip. So
yeah,
I'm
well,
talking
that's
to my family.
that's what I did with Sydney and Wagga Wagga. That was a road trip when I drove all the way, and Rob McCarthy slept all the way. But now I'm excited about going on a plane. But we need to move on now. So we do have a busy show with our South Australia candidates that we'll have coming up. But first, to lead into that, we're actually going to have our blistery history with John Ruddick, because the topic tonight is going to be South Australia, because it's a little bit different to some of our other states. John Ruddick, take it away.
Okay, well, I was born in South Australia, but that's not a notable event in South Australia history. Look, this is what happened. Okay, so Sydney kicks off in 1788. Hobart starts sort of 10, 15 years after as a penal colony. And then they crossed the Blue Mountains in 1813. And then once they did that, explorers just took off across Australia. John Oxley, Leichhardt, the whole lot of them. A guy called Charles Sturt was wandering around New South Wales, comes across the mighty Murray River. And he sails down the Murray River all the way to the ocean, and he calls it the Mississippi of Australia, which it is. And he writes a big report, says, look, there's a hell of a lot of agricultural land along the coast of this river, and right at the mouth of the river, we've got a great spot here to build a new colony. This is in the 1820s. Now, then the most important person in the history of South Australia is a guy called Edward Wakefield, who was, there he is. Now, Edward Wakefield had a colourful past. He was in England. He was a sort of a well-off aristocrat. And when he was 31, he abducted this 15-year-old girl and forced her to marry him against his will. Took her to Scotland and then to Paris, where the police caught up with him. And the girl got returned to the father, and he spent 3 years in jail. Now, in jail, as Liberal Democrats, we all believe in redemption and that people can improve themselves. And in jail, Edward Wakefield became obsessed with how to have an ideal colony. And he read all these books. There was lots of theoretical academic debate about what's a successful colony, what's unsuccessful, what works, etc., etc. Now, South Australia was sort of like going to be the next cab off the rank. And he says, look, what we need to do in South Australia is avoid the mistakes of New South Wales, Queensland and Tasmania, where they gave huge amounts of land away basically for nothing. And Edward Wakefield said, look, let's build this colony in South Australia. Let's have no convicts and let's sell small parcels of land. The state sells small parcels of land to rich people, and then that money will then go towards encouraging more immigration. So that's how South Australia started in the 1830s. They had, I think about 1838, they had about 9 boats turn up. They call it the first fleet of South Australia. And so it was this big state-owned enterprise with a hell of a lot of central planning and all the best of intentions and ideals, and they were going to be quite a liberal society. But 2 years later, this basically semi-socialist utopia went bankrupt. Surprise, surprise. So then South Australia became a crown colony, which basically meant it was run by London with sort of, they could sort of do whatever they want. Now, it actually prospered pretty strongly. Within sort of 15 years, it's got about 100,000 people there. By the 1850s, it becomes an independent colony, has its own parliament. I think it's the first place in the world to let females to not only vote, but also to run for office. Okay, so South Australia, South Australia has always really been Victoria's little brother, in that they very much are plugged in with each other. Their politics are plugged in with each other, and culturally they're plugged in with each other. When people leave Adelaide, or they often go to Melbourne first, and they play the same sport, etc., etc. Now, the most significant premier in the history of South Australia is a guy called Sir Thomas Playford. I think we've got his little picture up there. Now, he was the longest serving parliamentary leader in Australian history. Still is. Longer than Robert Menzies, longer than Joh Bjelke-Petersen. He was the Premier of South Australia from 1938 to 1965, and he was a Liberal.
Wow.
They never really had the country party in South Australia. They just had the Liberals. Okay, now, he started out as an early parliamentarian as a hardcore, laissez-faire, free trade, small state privatisation guy. Now then, as Premier, I don't know how the transformation happened. As Premier, he became the total opposite. He became he actually nationalised industry. And he was massive in trying to get Canberra to invest defence industries there and big government-sponsored industries and the car manufacturers with all their subsidies and everything. And he was back, and the Labor Party, the Labor opposition.
So nothing's changed actually. I just have to like pork barrelling, defence industries. We might have some people rebut my gauche, irreverent, and uncalled for.
Some comments about that, Cam. You better get in there.
The turnaround starts in 2.5 weeks, Campbell, when the Liberal Democrats storm the South Australian election. So Thomas Playford was the Labor opposition liked him. They said, look, we don't mind being in opposition. He's enacting all of our policies. And they got along well. And he got all this criticism from his own side, calling him a socialist, which is what he basically was. Anyway, they had a split in the 1970s in the Liberal Party. And a little thing called the Liberal Movement started with 11 state parliamentarians there for a while, which was the beginning of Don Chipp's Democrats. South Australia has always had this sort of liberal, left liberal element, the Australian Democrats, the Nick Xenophon type of people. Now, I know we're short of time tonight, Kirsty, but I've got the results here for the last South Australian upper house election, and it's just absolutely magnificent news that our team has drawn number one, which is the luck of the draw, but that's called democracy. Now, at the last election, the Liberal Democrats more than doubled their vote. It went to 2.47. Now, this is in an era of obviously well before COVID and well before we realised how bad the Liberal Party could be under Scott Morrison. Now, also interestingly is Corey Bernardi's party. The Marshmallow, yes.
The Marshmallow. So I just cannot, it's like I've got a case of, when it comes to this bloke, the Tourette's just comes out, John. I'm sorry. I'll go away now.
I agree. So now, look, if we add up Liberal Democrats 2.5, Conservatives 3.5. Now, a lot of former Corey Bernardi people are supporters of the Liberal Democrats. Not all of them. Not all of them will agree with this, but on economics, the Corey Bernardi people and Corey himself were very, very similar to the Liberal Democrats. Okay, so and now we've got the COVID situation, obviously. And we've got the debt, we've got the police state, and we've forced vaccines. We've got the number one on the draw. So look, 2.5 weeks. I've got a pretty positive feeling that we're going to go good there in that South Australian upper house. So I think our candidate, which we're going to meet shortly, James Hole. James, may the force be with you.
And speaking of James, we now introduce 3 of our candidates there for South Australia: James Hole, Joshua Smith, and Peter McMahon. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, James and Peter, you are both number 1 and number 2 for the Legislative Council. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Upper House here, Legislative Council, both number 1 and number 2.
And Josh, you are in the House of Assembly for the seat of Elder. Welcome.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And as we were saying earlier, it's really quite amazing. You maybe have used up all of our luck, but I don't think so. You've been able to draw position A in both seats there in South Australia. So it looks really awesome. And so tell us about that and a little bit of the difference in the name. Tell us about what's been going on, certainly in the last couple of days down there. James, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, drew number 1 position on the Legislative Council. And just so you're aware, because I know it's a bit different in other states, Legislative Council in South Australia, the whole state. So there's no separate districts. So we got number 1 spot. On Tuesday morning, we found out that we were there at the draw and it was great. And also I found out later that day in the seat of Elder, which is where Josh is, he's drawn the top spot there, which is quite a marginal seat as well. So it's good to have Liberal and Labor begging over us a little bit, which is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really exciting. We'll be on the ballot as Liberal Democrats, less government, more freedom. So you can't miss us.
It's fantastic. Now, James, you have been on the show before, only a couple of weeks ago, actually, but maybe just for the people that have missed that, a little bit of a recap about who you are and how you ended up here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great to be back. So I am relatively young, 27. I'm actually 28 in 8 days. But running here, I've been involved with the party for a while, but decided to get active since all the COVID stuff happened. Always had a fierce libertarian streak, I would say. Very passionate about small businesses and, free markets, bodily autonomy, all those kind of things. Grew up in a small business family, have some hospitality background, and really not, I would say I'm running as a candidate wasn't my dream, but I see that it's needed, and I put my hand up, and here we are.
That's excellent. Now, Peter, your running mate with James there. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Now, before I even get started, because there's several comments about, do you have to have a beard to be a candidate in Australia? And in fact, someone else is also saying, I feel I also need to grow a beard. Lots of beards. And if your dad doesn't have a beard, you've got two mums. Is that still the right thing? Are we like that anymore?
You see, the chin is where the Liberty overflow is.
Oh, okay.
So that's where all the excess Liberty comes out of the chin.
Right.
But yeah.
Peter, let us know a little bit about yourself.
I mean, up until about 3 months ago, I was just a regular kind of like job seeker, PC gamer type person. I used to do a bit of Twitch streaming, just kind of following dreams of like the entertainment sort of thing. Never, like, very much similar to James. Like, I've known James for a long time, and we've never been the kinds of people to be like involved in politics or anything like that. We've always loved a good debate, and we'll always debate each other and sort of share ideas and stuff like that, which has always been core tenets to my happiness. But never thought of getting into politics. But then James hassled me to have a look at the policies for Lib Dems. So I sort of, okay, I'll have a look at them. And then I went through all of them, and it would just sort of tick, like the whole way down the list. I decided I'd become a member, and then joined the policy writing committee that James set up for South Australia. We wrote our policy document, and then while I was up in Canberra, because I went up there for the protest, while I was up there, I found out that on my birthday, actually, that I'd be running, that I got for pre-selection. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. And then when I got back, just had to hit the ground running.
Exactly. That's how we do things around here. And if anyone looks at our website, Peter and Josh just got on our website today, so they are both up. You can read a little bit more at them, and also follow all of their social media links. Not your Twitch channel. Daniel in the chat is asking for Peter's Twitch channel. Let's keep that separate. I don't know what he does over there, so we can't.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't recommend my Twitch channel. That's for sure.
Now, Joshua, tell us about your seat, and maybe and where you're from, and what's the difference, I guess, between the two different types of houses there in South Australia.
Hey, Kirsty. So my seat, the seat of Elder, it is a great seat. It's old filled with amazing people, and it's really part of the inner circle around Adelaide, and it's part of the beating heart. And I feel like with such a liberal seat, and with families, especially these days, it's going to be a great seat for us to really grab hold of. Sorry, busy day.
We'll grab onto it, and we'll hold onto it as well. We'll do both of those things.
Yes, that is the plan. But as for me, I've grown up in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, so Salisbury, Paralowie, Para Hills. Spent a lot of time at sports clubs with my dad. And to be honest, I actually grew up in a very labor-intensive family, very always vote Labor, always vote Labor. Now, I sort of grew up with that understanding that, hey, vote Labor. But obviously, once you get through life and you start experiencing things, you sort of come to your own conclusions. And I think one of the biggest things that hit hard for me, and while I was only young, I would have only been 11 or 12, when Holden's got shut down was a really big thing for the state. 2,500 jobs gone in the blink of an eye, massive manufacturing industry, and I felt South Australia's pride take a real hit that day. Now, and yeah, that's a really big thing. The hospitals allow MAC, 500 nurses in beds just closed, fired. It's been horrible. And while I've always been a bit more politically inclined, like James and like Peter, never thought I'd jump into it. It's not one of those things that anyone really wants to do. They say you have to hate yourself to become a politician. But I think in our case, we just sort of hate what the country's become. Everyone I've spoken to doesn't recognize it, and that's what James, Peter, and especially myself want to bring back. Is the country that we love.
Well, and there's a great comment here from Lisa saying, I admire you young people, so proud of your commitment to becoming involved in the freedom fight. And it's great. We are definitely, we do have a young demographic within our party. That is great when we see young people stand up and put their hand up to be candidates as well, because, you know, it's not that easy in some ways that, you know, you're putting yourself out there publicly to be, you know, people to judge you and that kind of thing as well. And, you know, you've got to have a haircut and put a nice suit on sometimes. So
have a nice beard.
A nice beard in South Australia. You have to have a beard.
James, can I ask? So we're number one on the ticket, fabulous. Now you're also saying that there is, in addition to our name, Liberal and Liberal Democrats Party, we then have a little blurb beneath that actually on the ballot paper. Is that something that is new to this election, or is this something that's always the case?
No, so the registered abbreviation of the party, ironically, which is longer than the actual official name, is Liberal Democrats, Less Government, More Freedom. So it'll be one, there won't be like a different sort of subheading or anything. It'll just be in the one block of text.
Well, yeah. I think that should be very helpful. And
yes.
And now, what do you think? What policy do you think is going to resonate for the South Australian state election that the Liberal Democrats could provide?
Well, I think obviously COVID, you know, people are very upset about what's going on there, and you know, there's a lot of anger about it. And I also think small business, you know, so I've really approached that from the hospitality side of things. That's my background, and that's where I know a lot of people. And they're really upset. I was actually at a hospitality industry summit last night. Peter Malinowskis, the opposition leader, was also there, not wearing a mask.
As long as he was, as long as he was wearing his shirt, I hope.
He was wearing his shirt. But yeah, I mean, they're really angry and upset, and understandably so, because, you know, I know the margins they operate on, and it's tiny. And I really don't know how they've managed to get through. And yes, there is some compensation schemes, but as we all know here, compensation schemes are harsh. You know, if say the threshold is 30% loss of revenue and you lose 29% of revenue, well, no compensation for you. You know.
Well, and speaking of hospitality, you do have an event in Adelaide on Saturday night. Do you want to tell everyone about what's going on there?
Yeah, James, do you mind if I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, all right, awesome. So as James just said, hospitality is a big thing for him, and it's big for me. Not the proudest thing to admit, but I spent a lot of my childhood growing up in like the local pubs and rugby clubs, and my dad was a big sports guy. But I work in the city, and it's honestly been pretty sad and dark just seeing how hard the hospitality industry's been hit. I would prefer not to drop any names, but you know, this one got hit really hard. The Wakefield Hotel on Wakefield Street has actually been affected so hard that the employees, which is only 2, have actually had their wages cut in half because they can't afford salaries anymore, and they're on the verge of closing. And that really sucks. So the plan is a set of events. The first one's at the King's Head, actually, the first pub to open up in the state. Just to try and, you know, inject money into the industry, try and keep it afloat and breathe life into, well, something that we love in small business and family. Like the King's Head is a family-owned and operated business, and they had the goal to open up during COVID, believe it or not. Yeah, it's just been hit so hard, and it's sad to see such a great industry dying. So
yeah. Well, and even as Selby says in the comment, it's not just the hospitality staff, it's the whole food chain that goes along with that as well. All those businesses that supply those hospitality places are also totally affected. Now, there's a couple of comments in here about the fact that you're actually all young, the 3 of you, and perhaps needing some older heads around you as well. Rest assured, we definitely have older candidates around the country, but also we have older people on the team as well. So it's not just like we've got a bunch of 20-year-olds out there doing what they want. There's older members with more experience and also more policy experience. John and Campbell, do we count you as older candidates?
60 next year. Come on, please.
So Campbell's one of our older candidates.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good point. A lot of people don't realise how many people there are behind the scenes.
That's
You know,
right.
we've got a whole team of us behind, and
Yes.
you know, they keep us grounded, and they let us go as well. And you know, it's really good. It helps out a lot, and they definitely deserve a big mention and a big thank you.
Yeah.
They
And
definitely do.
there's also a lovely comment here from Maureen. She says, come on, Campbell. Some of us are in our 70s. Maureen Nathan is well and truly one of our party legends. She's been around a long time, an excellent author as well, has also done some excellent kids books to teach liberty to kids as well, because we want to indoctrinate the youth as well.
I've got to say, there's plenty of scope for candidates in Queensland.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how old you are. We'll take your nomination tomorrow.
That's right.
There
That's
you go.
right. We definitely want more candidates all around the country.
We do. Yeah.
You feel good. Now, okay, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Now, obviously, you are on the website, so if people go to that website, they will see how they can follow you, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They can email you and get in touch as well. But you've only got not that long to go. 19th of March is coming up pretty fast.
Good
And
luck.
Kate Fantanell, our WA lead candidate, she's actually going to head down to Adelaide for that as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, guys.
Just quickly, I'll just say that early polling opens on Monday. So South Australians, get ready, get out there. We'll be pretty well attended in most of the booths. So get out there and make your voice heard.
Beautiful.
All right, gentlemen, good luck.
Sounds good. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
guys.
Bye.
Thanks for having us on.
It's great to see they got a lot of work ahead of them with the state election, with the federal election. It's all happening down there. So because of the fact that this is a really exciting policy that we all love, we're actually going to play our Freedom Manifesto video very soon. David, John and Campbell, does any of you want to make any comments about South Australia before we go to the video?
Look, I think it's a really good opportunity because of the way that Marshall's conducted himself over the last few years. I think they're a dismal failure of a Liberal government. You know, I mean, just very quickly, I mean, I'm in commercial property, as some people watching tonight would know. So, you know, the former Labor government introduced this initiative where you didn't pay stamp duty when buying commercial property. Great initiative. What does this administration do? They sought to actually capture more people for land tax by changing the rules. And I might go to the technicalities, but it's quite onerous and quite odious as well. And that doesn't exist in other states. So, you know, he hasn't been very much about low tax and getting out of the way of business. I just make that point. And I just think, like Morrison, he is a flim-flam man. He's a coward. He won't stand up on issues and of principle. So go get him, guys. Go get him.
Well, there's a lot of great comments in here, and the guys are still online in the chat box. So if you do have any questions or comments for them, they're in there. And I have seen there's also a whole lot of other candidates from around the country all in there as well. Kate Fantanell is in there. David Segal in Melbourne is in there. Saw Nick Samios from Barawa in there as well. So there's a bunch of our candidates in there. So feel free to chat to them whilst they're there.
Sorry, you go, David.
I'd also say with the South Australia candidates, it's great to see some young candidates put their hands up. I'm going to be organising a live stream with Canelm and James soon. So if you follow me on social media, especially on Facebook, I'll be doing a live stream with them soon, and you can get to know them a bit more and maybe ask them some questions directly. But I'm really looking forward to the South Australia election.
Yeah,
and I'm also going to be doing a trip down to Adelaide to assist Canelm. Couldn't get there in time for the election. But, to come down and do a fundraiser for the party down there, because I think there's fertile territory. And just one other thought on Marshall, because he really infuriates.
It really grinds your gears.
It's like this. He is the best Labor premier that the state's had for quite some time.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Righto. Well, on that note, we are going to play now our 7th Freedom Manifesto. It's cheap and reliable energy. That's the next clip, sorry. And this one is featuring Campbell Newman.
High energy prices are not caused by greedy energy companies. Despite the fortnightly A Current Affairs segment of a working class bloke sitting at his kitchen table looking over his bills, neither Labor or Liberal governments will ever bring electricity prices down. But the Lib Dems will, because we know the source of the problem. G'day, I'm Campbell Newman, and I'm your Queensland Senate candidate for the Lib Dems. In this video, I want to talk to you about the 7th policy in the Lib Dems Freedom Manifesto: cheap energy. Let me ask you, when you're uncertain about when the next lockdown will be, do you plan an overseas trip? Do you plan big weddings or social events? Probably not, because obviously you're uncertain about whether the government will order another lockdown. Well, this is similar to the energy industry. A climate hysteria and uncertainty created by the Liberal and Labor governments creates a disincentive for the energy industry so that they don't invest in their own businesses. The Lib Dems envisage an energy industry competing in the free market with less regulation and more options for consumers. Further to this, we want to open up the door to the cleanest, safest and lowest CO2 emitting source of energy, nuclear power. Today, there are 440 operating nuclear power plants in the world, another 164 either being built or planned. Over 70% of French electricity is generated by nuclear energy, and over a dozen other nations generate more than 20% of their electricity from nuclear energy. Australia has all the ingredients to be a world leader in nuclear energy. There have been 3 government inquiries in recent years that recommended a nuclear energy industry, but the ban on nuclear power has stopped Australia from progressing. The Lib Dems will repeal the blanket ban on nuclear energy in Australia, create a free market on energy. It's the government's manipulation of the market that increases prices. All sources of energy should compete in the market on their own merits of reliability and cost. Remove future regulations. Refuse a net zero carbon emissions target. Abolish the renewable energy target. Lift state government bans on mining uranium. Make regulations fair and consistent by putting them on an equal footing with other low carbon technologies. In the long term, this means energy prices will stabilise, different companies will be able to compete fairly in the market, and Australia will take its first step towards safe and reliable nuclear power.
Authorised by John Humphreys for the Liberal Democratic Party, Mount Waverley, Victoria.
Well, that was another great one. I'm loving all these videos, actually. They're so well done in terms of bringing a longer policy into a short few minutes. Great work, Campbell.
Thanks, yep. And I just, if you want me to lead off, Kirsty, I guess I'd just say one thing about this tonight, that it's also coupled with now, I think that's been demonstrated, not getting into the Ukrainian situation about the Ukraine, just talking about Germany. The poster girl of politics in Europe was Angela Merkel, and she, over the last probably 15 years, handed her country's head on a plate in terms of energy security. I'm not talking about the Ukraine. I'm just talking about Germany. They decide they're going to get rid of nuclear power. They got rid of their brown coal. Sound like Victoria, David? And they then bought Russian gas. So obviously they sort of compromised their independence. And I think that's a big part of what we can talk about now as well. We should be talking about the fact that we've got plentiful fossil fuel resources, and we have the great uranium resources, and there is no reason that we shouldn't have the cheapest energy in the world. So that's just my add-on to the actual video. It's another way of looking at it.
Well, look, just to follow up from what Campbell's saying, yes, Germany is in massive trouble with its energy because they went hardcore on the renewables. Now, France, on the other hand, because they've been invested in nuclear for decades, and the French economy has always been, since World War II, has been a lot weaker than the German economy, smaller than the German economy. But France now has this massive advantage, and it's called nuclear energy. So if ever there was, I mean, we don't know how big this Ukraine thing is going to be. This could be the biggest issue still come election day. So this nuclear energy policy is could end up being our most sort of our best weapon in the election.
Mm. Now, David, we know that your nuclear energy is one of your favourite topics as well. What did you think of how the video played out, and how much do you love our policy?
Oh, look, the video was great. Campbell did a great job in presenting it. Look, I've always loved our energy policy. I think it's one of the policies that we've had for a very long time, and it's one of the things that attracted me to the party in the first place. I'll say this, like, I'm one of the few members of parliament that actually has any qualifications in science. My background is in physics, and I studied, relativity and stuff at university, and I loved nuclear, technology then. And, I went through a period where I wasn't so keen on it, but I'm very enthusiastic about it now. Look, I think strategically, as Campbell has alluded to, Australia has the ability to produce massive amounts of our own energy through nuclear and fossil fuels. But we've chosen to make ourselves dependent on cheap Chinese renewable energy. And a lot of that is around solar energy. I think that strategically, we should consider whether that's a smart thing for us to do. Similarly to what we've heard about Germany making themselves dependent on Russian gas, we should consider whether that's a smart idea for us to be perpetually dependent on Chinese renewables, because they don't last forever. You buy the solar panels, they last 15 to 20 years, and then you have to replace them. And it only makes sense if it's cheap, and it's only cheap if it's coming from China. So I think it's very important for Australia to think about, okay, is that a smart thing for us to do in perpetuity, or should we be taking away some of the restrictions that we've got on ourselves around nuclear energy, for example, and looking at developing that type of technology ourselves? Certainly, I know that many people have varying views on climate change and stuff like this. I know John and I would probably disagree on this, but I think one thing that we can agree on is that in the scheme of things, Australia is a very small player. We're not like China. We're not like the United States. We're not like Europe. We're a very small player in the scheme of things. And if we wanted to send a signal to the world on clean energy, a very, very strong signal, probably the strongest signal that we could send, would be to legalize nuclear energy. And that would send a very strong signal to the world that we're serious about producing clean energy. We're serious about, looking at all options that are available to us. And I think it's absolutely critical that we do this as soon as possible.
I think we'd all agree. I think you get no disagreeing with any of that, that's for sure. And there's a lot of comments, a lot of favourable comments in the chat box as well.
Just to throw in, and so I've, on a number of occasions in the last week, really hooked into Cannon Brooks. And I was speaking to Daniel, Daniel Lukovich, who's going for Wentworth for us. And John, you might want to sort of take this on board as well, but I reckon we should just hook into him and even do a press release on it, because at least that might deal us into the debate on this, because he's there advocating taking over AGL, shutting down the coal-fired power plants. So the challenge I've issued through the media to him is, well, if you're serious about this, you will establish the largest solar panel manufacturing plant in the world, and you'll establish it in Australia, and you'll employ Australians. You'll back it with your money and his overseas fellow investors. If he's not prepared to do that, then what he's doing is just, it is just him trying to make money at the expense of the mums and dads of Australia. So I think we should really push that hard. And again, the reason we would particularly personalise like that is he has been so prominent, and he's really trying extremely hard to use large amounts of money to actually create a situation that's going to be bad for everyday Australians.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because there was actually a question about Cannon Brooks in there as well. So that was excellent. Thank you, Cam. Now, there's a couple of other questions about candidates in various areas as well, different electorates. Everyone that's endorsed so far is on the website. And there are definitely people across the country still in the works and still going through some of their paperwork and the endorsement. So we are looking at having as many candidates as we can across the country. But even if we don't have a House of Reps candidate in your locality, you will definitely still have the Senate candidates to vote for. So you're still getting to vote for a Liberal Democrats candidate. So let me just see what other sort of questions. There is a question here about what is the time frame on the digital identification legislation? Has anyone looked much into that? Obviously, it goes in a little bit into our surveillance policy. How does the digital ID proposal square with the cyber hacking narrative? Any views on these existential issues?
I think that's a David Limbrick question.
I'm not sure it's an existential issue.
I don't know why.
I'm not sure it's existential. I
It's
wouldn't go
definitely
that
not
far.
existential. I think that sort of goes into our policy.
Look, we haven't analysed the federal legislation on this, but I have looked over it a bit. Look, we do have concerns about the whole digital ID thing that they're putting together. I think this ties into our surveillance policy. We have, very clear policy on the surveillance state and, how the government is effectively collecting too much information on private citizens and should restrict what it's doing to, if they want to put citizens under surveillance, we think that they should get a warrant, for the people that, they want to look at, not just do general mass surveillance. And digital ID sort of enables a lot of that. So we may have more to say about that in coming months. In Victoria, we actually have some legislation coming up, which you'll probably hear us make a bit of noise about. It's a similar sort of concept. It's around setting up a medical ID and then without your consent, taking all your medical information and enable it to be shared amongst all GPs, hospitals, paramedics, whole bunch of other medical practitioners. We have very, very serious concerns about this. It's not able to be opted out of, unlike the federal system that they had where you could opt out of it. This one you can't opt out of it. We've got some very serious concerns about it. So expect to hear a lot more about this from us in Victoria over the next few weeks.
Now, I'm just going to very quickly run over a couple of the events that there are happening around the country in the next few days. The Freedom Manifesto video that we just showed you is up on our Facebook and YouTube already to share, so make sure you all get to sharing. Firstly, WA has a social barbecue this weekend on Saturday. Actually, you can get to the website to get those information. If you're in WA, you would have already got an email about it. Victoria, as David said, there's a couple of barbecues on in 2 different areas in Melbourne, but stay tuned. The weather might actually change some of that. Sydney, as John Ruddick has already said, there's the Wentworth launch, or I just call it the Luco launch, Daniel Lukovic's candidate for Wentworth at the Sofitel Darling Harbour. We're using that as a little bit of a quasi New South Wales campaign launch as well. Get to the website for information about that. There's also a Sydney branch meeting this Friday night in North Sydney. This Friday night. There's the Barawa Liberty Barbecue on Saturday as well, 5th of March. That's for Nick Samios. Nick Samios also has, in a couple of weeks' time, you can get tickets online for that, but he's got a lunch symposium, flat taxes and free markets. Nick is on the show here tonight. You can get in the chat box there. But please do get to the website. You'll see all the information about these events. There'll also be a bit of a presence at the Newcastle show this weekend. Queensland had a couple of events also postponed, branch meetings postponed because of flooding, obviously. And I don't know what that was, but and then South Australia, as we said earlier, on Saturday night, there is a social event at the King's Head Hotel. So all of those events, you'll either get emails about them if you are in those areas, but they are up on the website as well. So if you need to get tickets for some of them, please do get along, get involved. And meet some of the crew, meet some of the local members around you. Anything that I've forgotten in those events you can think of, guys?
Sounds like the calendar's getting fuller and fuller.
It is.
Yes.
There's something on all the time. Obviously, we're going, we're heading into full campaign mode. So there's things happening all over the place. And I know Campbell has another regional tour coming up in a couple of weeks as well. Where's that one going to, Cam?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, sorry, wasn't sure I was still muted. Look, I'll actually be doing at least 2. The next one will be out to sort of places like Charleville and points sort of further west. So we're really trying to cover the whole place. We're also, looking at getting to places like Bundaberg and Maryborough as well, and Gympie after the floods, Harvey Bay. So we're really just trying to cover that ground because it is a very diversified population-wise state. So you got to get out there. But it's interesting, by the way, just to add one thing. I was talking to people this afternoon, and the fact that we went to those locations, Cairns, etc., Townsville, we've actually got people now in other locations contacting the campaign going, well, when's Newman coming here? And that's a good thing. That's great.
Yeah.
It is great. Now, I will just quickly answer, because it's been brought up a couple of times here. What is the answer to the question about the UAP reusing Lib Dem material? So there's been some ads with using a very familiar graph straight out of our Freedom Manifesto.
We're very flattered.
Great.
I think it's wonderful.
It is wonderful. They're sharing our information.
I wish they attributed it, but they can't do everything. But
It shows how good our information is.
The idea that other parties are adopting our policies and manifesto, if they all adopted it, then we could just go away and forget about politics. It would be wonderful. But
it is good, David. I mean, we should just share it with people and go, "Well, look at that," and make a bit of a joke about it, and just point out though that we're the ones pointing
That's right.
to start this issue about the debt, and it's the Liberal Party as well as the Labor Party that are
That's
doing
right.
it now. Yeah.
Well, and
in seriousness though, like the people who put together the Freedom Manifesto that we did, they went to a lot of work for it. And rather than them be upset that people have ripped it off, I'd like them to be excited that people are ripping it off, because, that means that they've done such good work that people want to copy it. So, I don't see a problem with that. It's good.
Exactly. That just shows how great our work is. Well, that's another episode for the week. Obviously, please share the Freedom Manifesto about our cheap energy policies. Share it amongst your friends and your family. Follow all of our candidates on social media, get to some events. Obviously, they're all up there on the website as well. We've got a lot of stuff happening. We need your help. Join totally in the party. Get to the website, ldp.org.au. Join, donate, volunteer, get involved, get yourself a snazzy shirt or a silly hat or something. Spread the word, spread the message. We need what's David doing? I thought he was going to show us something then. We need all the messages spread around the place. We need boots on the ground all over the place. But thank you once again for joining us for another episode of Liberty Chat.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kirsty.
guys.
Thanks,
See
everyone.
you all next week. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for Liberty Chat, brought to you by the Liberal Democrats. Visit ldp.org.au for more info.